She was living a dream life everyone admired, but no one knew it wasn't her choice. From the outside, Elara Quinn's life looked flawless. It was the kind of life that existed in magazine covers, in curated social media posts, in whispered conversations between people who believed perfection could be achieved if enough money was involved. Her name carried weight in elite circles, spoken with a certain quiet admiration reserved for those born into power rather than those who chased it. She had never needed to chase anything. That was the first truth people misunderstood about her, because everything had always been placed in front of her, carefully selected, precisely arranged, and quietly enforced. Elara stood at the edge of the ballroom, her posture straight, her expression composed, her presence exactly what the room expected her to be. The event around her unfolded in perfect harmony. Soft music drifting through the air, polished laughter echoing beneath crystal chandeliers, conversations layered with influence and intention. Everything was controlled. Everything was calculated. And she was part of that calculation. Her gown, elegant and understated, moved with her like it belonged to someone else. Every detail, from the cut to the color, had been chosen long before she had even seen it, not because she lacked taste, but because her taste had never been required. Her role had already been defined. Elara Quinn wasn't just a person. She was an image, a representation of legacy, a continuation of power. Her family had built their name over decades, moving through industries and alliances with a quiet precision that never drew unnecessary attention. They didn't need to be loud to be influential. Their control existed beneath the surface, embedded in decisions that shaped outcomes long before anyone realized there had been a choice at all. And Elara was part of that system. From a young age, she had been taught what mattered, not through strict rules or visible restrictions, but through expectation. Subtle, consistent, unavoidable. Speak carefully, move gracefully, choose wisely, but most importantly, never disrupt what has already been decided. That was the unspoken rule, and she had followed it, not because she wanted to, because she had never been given a reason not to. Her gaze drifted across the room, observing the familiar patterns. Influential figures, powerful families, carefully maintained relationships disguised as casual interactions. Every smile carried intention. Every conversation had purpose. Nothing here was accidental. Her eyes paused briefly when they landed on him. Adrian Cross. He stood near the center of the room, surrounded by attention without appearing to seek it. That was part of what made him effective. His presence didn't demand control. It assumed it. Tall, composed, perfectly tailored in both appearance and behavior. Adrian embodied the kind of power that didn't need to explain itself. He had built his reputation, not through noise, but through results. Strategic investments, quiet acquisitions, decisions that shifted markets without warning. People respected him. Some feared him. And soon, he would be her husband. The thought didn't bring emotion, not excitement, not hesitation, just awareness. Because their engagement had never been about feeling. It had been about alignment. Families like theirs didn't operate on uncertainty. They built connections that strengthened their position, that expanded their reach, that secured their future. And marriage was one of the most effective tools for that. Elara understood that. She had always understood it, which was why she had accepted the engagement without resistance. Not because she loved Adrian, but because love had never been part of the equation. Their relationship, if it could be called that, existed within defined boundaries. Respectful, controlled, efficient. They spoke when necessary, appeared together when expected, fulfilled their roles without deviation. There were no arguments, no misunderstandings, no emotional complications. And that was exactly why it worked. From the outside, they were perfect, a union of power and elegance, a future that seemed inevitable. But perfection is often just the absence of visible flaws, not the presence of truth. Elara shifted slightly, adjusting her posture as another group approached her, their expressions warm, their words rehearsed in the way compliments often are. You look stunning. This event is beautiful. You and Adrian are perfect together. She responded the way she had been taught, with grace, with calm, with just enough warmth to satisfy expectation, but nothing more, because anything more would be real, and reality had no place here. As the conversation moved on, her composure remained intact, but something beneath it tightened slightly. Not frustration, not anger, something quieter, something more difficult to define. Because the problem wasn't the life she was living. The problem was, it had never been hers. Every decision, every step, every moment that had led her here had been shaped by something larger than her own choice. Not forced, not directly, but guided. And guidance, when consistent enough, becomes control. Ilera moved away from the crowd, her steps measured, her presence unnoticed in the way someone like her could disappear when she chose to. She found a quieter section of the room, where the noise softened just enough to allow her thoughts to surface without interruption. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel it. The distance, the detachment, the quiet realization that had been building for years but had never fully formed into something she could confront, because confronting it would require action, and action would disrupt everything. Her reflection caught briefly in the glass of a nearby window, perfectly composed, elegant, untouched by uncertainty. But she knew better, because beneath that image, there was nothing solid, just expectation, just structure, just a life that had been built around her, not by her. The realization settled deeper than before, not new, but clearer, because clarity changes everything. Ilera turned slightly, her gaze moving back across the room, finding Adrian again without effort. He was speaking with someone now, his expression controlled, his movements precise, every detail aligned with the image he maintained. He looked exactly like the future she was expected to step into. Stable, powerful, unquestioned, and completely unavoidable. There was nothing wrong with him. That was the most complicated part. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't careless. He wasn't anything that could justify resistance. Which meant there was no reason to say no, except one. It wasn't her choice. That thought didn't come with rebellion. It came with quiet understanding. Because sometimes the absence of choice is more suffocating than any visible restriction. Ilera exhaled slowly, her posture remaining unchanged even as her thoughts shifted into something sharper, more aware, because now she wasn't just observing her life. She was recognizing it for what it truly was, a structure, a system, a carefully controlled path that led to a future already decided, and she was simply expected to follow it. Her attention shifted again as Adrian began moving toward her, his steps confident, his expression calm, his presence commanding without effort. He stopped beside her, his gaze briefly scanning the room before settling. Everything about him was intentional, even silence. They stood there together, side by side, the image of perfection, the embodiment of everything the room admired. And yet, there was nothing between them, no connection, no depth, just alignment, just expectation, just a future that had been agreed upon long before either of them had truly considered it. Ilera didn't look at him, not because she was avoiding him, but because looking would imply something that didn't exist. Instead, she focused on a space in front of her, the reflection of a world that saw something perfect where nothing real had ever been allowed to form. Because the truth was simple. She wasn't living her life. She was performing it, and performances always have an end. The question was, who decides when? The music shifted slightly, the tone of the room adjusting as the night moved forward, each moment flowing seamlessly into the next, just as it had been designed to. Everything continued, uninterrupted, unchanged, perfect, until it wouldn't be. Because somewhere beyond this carefully constructed world, beyond the expectations and alliances and the silent agreements, something had already begun to move, something that did not follow rules, something that did not respect structure, something that did not care about perfection. And when it arrived, it wouldn't ask for permission. Ilera felt it before she understood it. A shift, subtle, almost unnoticeable, but real, because systems like hers only remain perfect until something powerful enough decides to break them. And that moment was closer than she realized. Everything was planned perfectly, until someone powerful decided to break that plan. Some people don't enter your life, they take it. The shift Alara Quinn had sensed the night before did not disappear. It settled, quietly, permanently. By morning, everything looked the same. The world had not changed on the surface. The same routines unfolded. The same expectations followed her. The same carefully structured life continued moving forward without interruption. But something beneath it had moved. And once something moves inside a control system, it does not return to stillness. Alara noticed it in the smallest ways first. Conversations that paused too quickly when she entered a room. Subtle glances exchanged between people who were usually composed. A tension beneath the polished surface of her family's world that had not been there before. It wasn't chaos. It was awareness. The kind that spreads before anyone admits something is wrong. She didn't ask about it, because questions in her world were rarely answered directly. Instead, she observed, because observation had always given her more truth than words. That afternoon, she stood inside one of the private galleries owned by her family, a place designed to reflect refinement and control. Every piece displayed had been selected not just for beauty, but for meaning, influence, history, ownership. Everything here told a story about power, and power never existed without opposition. Alara moved slowly through the space, her gaze drifting across the artwork without truly focusing on any single piece. Her thoughts were elsewhere, tracing the subtle disruption she had felt since the previous night, because something had changed, and change, in a world like hers, always came from outside. The doors at the far end of the gallery opened without announcement. That alone was unusual. Nothing in her life happened without announcement. Alara didn't turn immediately, because reacting too quickly revealed uncertainty. And uncertainty was something she had been taught to hide. Instead, she allowed the moment to settle, her posture unchanged, her attention shifting only slightly as the presence behind her entered the room. She felt it before she saw it. Not loud, not aggressive, but undeniable. The kind of presence that didn't demand attention, but controlled it anyway. That was when she turned, and for the first time, she saw him, Lucien Verrek. There was nothing exaggerated about him, nothing that relied on appearance to create impact. He was dressed simply but precisely, dark clothing, tailored but not showy, every detail intentional, but none of it designed to impress, because he didn't need to impress. Power like his didn't perform. It existed. His posture was relaxed, but not careless. His movements controlled, but not rigid. He walked through the gallery as if the space belonged to him, not with arrogance, but with certainty. And certainty was far more dangerous. Alara's gaze remained steady, her expression composed, but her awareness sharpened instantly, because this was not someone from her world, not in the way she understood it. There was no introduction, no formal acknowledgement, no explanation for his presence. And yet, no one stopped him. That alone told her everything she needed to know, because in her world, access was controlled, and anyone who moved freely within it was either invited or too powerful to be questioned. Lucien stopped a few steps away from her, his gaze moving across the gallery briefly before settling. On her, not with curiosity, not with surprise, with recognition, as if he had already seen her, long before this moment. Alara felt it immediately. Not fear, not yet, but something close, because being seen, in a world built on control, was dangerous. "You're not supposed to be here," she said. Her voice was calm, controlled, carrying the same quiet authority she had been raised to maintain. Lucien didn't respond right away. His silence wasn't hesitation. It was choice. "I go where I need to," he said finally. The words were simple, but they carried weight, because they weren't a justification. They were a fact. Alara studied him carefully now, her mind aligning every detail, every signal, every inconsistency. He didn't behave like the people she knew. He didn't follow the same rules. And that made him unpredictable. "Then you're in the wrong place," she replied, still calm, still controlled, still maintaining the structure she understood. Lucien's gaze didn't shift. "No," he said. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. That, that was the hook, because it reframed everything. This wasn't intrusion. This was intention. Ilera felt the shift settle deeper, because now, this wasn't about his presence. It was about his purpose. And what is that? She asked. The question was simple, but it carried weight, because now, she was no longer dismissing him. She was acknowledging him. Lucian took a slow step forward, not closing the distance completely, but enough to change the space between them. To see something that doesn't belong here, he said. Ilera's expression didn't change, but internally, that statement landed with precision, because it wasn't random. It wasn't vague. It was directed at her. She held his gaze, refusing to react, refusing to give him anything he could use. I belong exactly where I am, she said. Another statement, another controlled response, because that was what she had been taught. Lucian's expression remained unreadable. No, he replied quietly. You've just been placed here. The words were soft, but they carried more impact than anything else he had said, because they weren't an opinion. They were a truth, and truth, in the wrong moment, can feel like exposure. Ilera felt something tighten beneath her composure, not visible, not obvious, but real, because he had said something no one else ever had, something no one else ever would. He saw through the image, through the structure, through the life she had been performing. And that was dangerous. Careful, she said. Her voice remained calm, but there was a shift now, a warning. Lucian didn't react to it, because warnings only matter to people who fear consequence. And he didn't. I don't deal in appearances, he said. I deal in truth. That distinction mattered, because her world was built on appearances, and his clearly wasn't. Ilera felt the contrast settle fully now. Adrian Cross represented control, structured power, predictable influence, a system she understood. Lucian Varick was something else entirely, unstructured, unrestricted, unpredictable, and that was far more dangerous, because you can prepare for control. You can't prepare for chaos that knows exactly what it's doing. Then you're in the wrong place, she repeated. But this time, the words felt weaker, because she no longer believed them completely. Lucian studied her for a moment, not her appearance, not her posture, her reaction, because that was what mattered. You're going to marry Adrian Cross, he said. Not a question, a statement. Ilera didn't respond immediately, because this was where the lines blurred. How do you know that? She asked. Lucian's expression didn't change. I know everything that matters. Again, not an explanation, a fact. And that created something new. Not fear, but awareness. Because if he knew that, then he knew more, far more. Then you know it's none of your concern, she said. Lucian's gaze held hers. That's where you're wrong. The words were quiet, but final, because they didn't invite discussion. They ended it. Ilera felt the shift deepen, because now, this wasn't a chance encounter. This wasn't coincidence. This was something deliberate, something planned, and she was at the center of it. Why are you here? She asked. This time, the question carried no pretense, no performance, just clarity. Lucian didn't look away. Because your life isn't what you think it is. That statement changed everything. Because it confirmed something she had only begun to realize herself. But hearing it from him made it real. And you think you understand it? She asked. Lucian took another small step forward, now close enough that the space between them no longer felt neutral. I understand it better than you do, he said. That was a line. Because it crossed from observation into control. Ilera's posture remained steady, but internally, her thoughts shifted rapidly. Because now, she understood something clearly. He wasn't just aware of her life. He was connected to it, somehow, in ways she didn't understand yet. And that made him dangerous in a way she couldn't define. You shouldn't be here, she said again. But this time, it wasn't a statement. It was recognition, because this wasn't his world. And yet, he moved through it as if it was. Lucian's expression didn't change. "I go where I need to," he repeated. Then, a pause, just long enough to shift everything. "And right now," his gaze held hers with absolute certainty, "I need to be here." Illyria felt it fully now. The shift, the disruption, the moment where control begins to slip. Because nothing about this interaction followed the rules she had lived by her entire life. There were no expectations, no structure, no clear outcome, only uncertainty and intention. She didn't understand him. She didn't trust him. But one thing was clear. He knew something about her life, about the system she had never questioned until now, and that knowledge gave him power. A different kind of power than Adrian, not built on structure, built on truth, and truth is far more dangerous. Lucian stepped back slightly, breaking the tension just enough to restore distance, but not enough to remove presence, because presence, once established, doesn't disappear. "You'll understand soon," he said. Not a threat, not a promise, something in between. And that made it worse, because uncertainty lingers longer than fear. Illyria didn't respond, because she didn't need to. Everything that mattered had already been said. Lucian turned without waiting for anything else, his movement calm, controlled, final. He walked toward the exit with the same quiet authority he had entered with. No one stopped him. No one questioned him. And that confirmed everything. He wasn't part of her world, but her world couldn't control him. The doors closed behind him softly, but the impact of his presence remained. Illyria stood still, her posture unchanged, her expression composed. But internally, everything had shifted, because now she knew something she couldn't ignore. Her life was not as controlled as she believed, and somewhere beyond the structure she had always trusted, someone had already decided to change it. Her gaze remained fixed on the space where it stood, her thoughts sharper, clearer, more dangerous than before. Because now, this wasn't about curiosity. This was about disruption. And disruption always leads somewhere. One truth settled with quiet certainty in her mind as the silence returned. He didn't come for business. He came for her. The day that was meant to define her future became the day everything was stolen. The morning arrived exactly as it had been designed. Perfect, controlled, unquestionable. Illyria Quinn stood at the center of a world that had spent months preparing for this single moment. Every detail had been arranged with precision. Every element calculated to project power, stability, and perfection. The venue itself was not just a location. It was a statement. Glass, marble, and light. Everything open. Everything visible. Everything meant to be seen. Because this wedding was not just a union. It was a display of wealth, of influence, of control. Illyria stood still as the final adjustments were made around her. Stylists moved carefully, ensuring every detail aligned with expectation. The gown was flawless, designed not for comfort, but for impact. Every line intentional, every element structured to reflect something larger than her. She wasn't just wearing it. She was representing something through it. And that was the problem. Because nothing about this day belonged to her. Not the dress, not the venue, not the man waiting at the altar, not even the future it was supposed to secure. It had all been decided, long before she had been asked, if she had ever been asked at all. Illyria's reflection stared back at her from the mirror, composed and untouched by emotion. To anyone looking, she was exactly what she was supposed to be, confident, elegant, certain. But internally, there was nothing, no anticipation, no excitement, no connection, only awareness. Because she understood something clearly now. This day wasn't the beginning of her life. It was a continuation of a system she had never controlled. The quiet realization settled again, just like it had the night Lucian Varick stepped into her world. Her life was not what it seemed. And today was proof of that. A soft knock broke the stillness. Not loud, not urgent, but timed. Everything today was timed. Illyria's time. The voice came from outside the door, calm and rehearsed. She didn't respond immediately because moving forward meant accepting the path, and acceptance was something she no longer gave easily. Still, she turned because hesitation here would change nothing, only expose everything, and exposure in her world was not allowed. She stepped forward, leaving the room behind as she entered the long corridor leading toward the main hall. The space was filled with controlled movement. Staff, security, coordinators, everyone functioned within a system designed to ensure perfection. No mistakes, no surprises, no disruptions. That was the illusion. Ilera walked forward, her steps measured, her posture flawless, her expression unreadable. Cameras waited beyond the final doors. Media presence had already begun. This wasn't just a wedding. It was a broadcast, a narrative, a confirmation of power. And she was the centerpiece. The doors opened. Light flooded the space. And just like that, she stepped into the version of her life the world believed in. Rows of guests filled the hall, dressed in wealth and expectation. Every face carried the same expression: approval. Not emotional, not personal, strategic, because every person here understood what this event meant. Connections, alliances, position. Ilera's gaze moved forward, locking onto the figure waiting at the altar. Adrian Cross, immaculate, composed, predictable. Everything about him reflected control. His posture, his expression, even the way he stood, balanced, measured, calculated. There was no uncertainty in him, because this moment had always been certain. Ilera continued walking, each step echoing softly against the polished floor, each movement aligned with expectation, everything unfolding exactly as planned. But something beneath the surface felt wrong, not visibly, not obviously, but unmistakably, because control, when pushed too far, becomes fragile. And fragile systems break. The ceremony began. Words were spoken. Formalities followed. Everything moved with precision. But Ilera's focus shifted, not to Adrian, not to the audience. Somewhere else, somewhere unseen. Because instinct, when ignored too long, doesn't disappear. It sharpens. And hers was louder now than ever before. A subtle movement near the entrance caught her attention. Not dramatic, not disruptive, just different. Security shifted slightly. Not enough to alarm, but enough to notice. Ilera's gaze flickered for a fraction of a second, and that was when everything changed. Because he was there, Lucien Verek, standing at the edge of a world that was never meant to include him. Still, calm, uninvited, and completely in control. The moment stretched, not visibly, but internally, because nothing about his presence made sense within this environment. And yet, no one stopped him, no one reacted, no one intervened. That alone was the first crack in the illusion. Ilera felt it instantly. Not fear, not panic, clarity, because now she understood something deeper. Control is only real until something stronger enters the room. Lucien didn't move immediately. He didn't interrupt, didn't speak, didn't announce himself. He simply stood there, watching, and somehow that was enough. The ceremony continued, unaware, uninterrupted, but only on the surface, because beneath it, everything had already shifted. Lucien took one step forward, and that single movement collapsed the structure, not loudly, not violently, silently, because real power doesn't need noise. It replaces control without asking. Security moved, but too late. Their reaction came after his action, and that was the difference. Ilera felt it before it happened. The moment where control disappears. Not gradually, instantly. Lucien reached her, not rushed, not aggressive, precise, calculated. And in that moment, everything stopped, not physically, but structurally, because the system that had controlled every second of this day was no longer in control. Ilera didn't resist, not because she couldn't, because she understood. Resistance, in a moment like this, was irrelevant. This wasn't chaos. This was execution. Planned, timed, inevitable. Lucien's presence surrounded her without force. And yet, it was absolute. Adrian moved, but not fast enough. Security reacted, but not effectively, because they were operating within a system. And Lucien was operating above it. Elara felt the shift completely now. The moment where illusion breaks, where control disappears, where power reveals itself, not as something structured, but something real. She was moved, not violently, not dramatically, cleanly, efficiently, without disruption. And that was what made it terrifying. Because nothing about this felt random. Nothing about this felt rushed. Everything about it felt decided. The crowd didn't react immediately because they didn't understand. They saw movement, but not meaning. And by the time meaning reached them, it was already over. Elara was gone, not taken in chaos, removed in precision. The doors closed behind them, and just like that, the perfect world collapsed. But only for those who understood what had happened. For everyone else, it was confusion, shock, disruption. But for Elara, it was clarity, because as the space around her changed, as the structure she lived inside disappeared, one truth settled deeper than anything else. She had never been in control, not of her life, not of this moment, not of what came next. But now, someone else was. Lucien didn't speak, didn't explain, didn't justify, because explanation was unnecessary. This was a negotiation. It was decision. Elara's thoughts remained sharp, focused, controlled, because panic would not change anything, and understanding was the only thing that mattered now. The movement stopped. The world outside no longer visible. Silence replaced everything. But it wasn't empty. It was intentional. Lucien stood near her, his presence unchanged, calm, certain, unshaken. Elara turned slightly, her gaze meeting his for the first time since everything shifted. Not with fear, not with confusion, with awareness. Because now, she understood something critical. This was not random. This was not impulsive. This was not about disruption. This was about purpose. Her voice, when it came, was quiet, controlled. You planned this. Not a question, a realization. Lucien didn't deny it. Yes. That single word confirmed everything. Elara's thoughts aligned instantly, because now she saw the full structure, the wedding, the timing, the access, the execution. None of it was coincidence. None of it was reaction. It was strategy, and she was at the center of it. Her gaze sharpened slightly. Why? This time, the question mattered, because now everything depended on the answer. Lucien held her gaze, not avoiding, not deflecting, direct, because you don't belong to them. The words landed with precision, because they weren't emotional. They were factual, and facts are harder to fight than feelings. Elara didn't respond immediately, because something inside her recognized the truth in that statement. But recognition didn't mean understanding. And that gives you the right? She asked. Lucien didn't hesitate. It gives me reason. That was the hook. Because reason implies purpose. And purpose is never random. Elara felt the final shift settle. Because now there was no illusion left. No misunderstanding. No confusion. This was not about control. Not about power. Not about disruption. This was about something deeper. Something planned long before today. Something connected to her in ways she did not yet understand. Her breathing remained steady, her posture controlled, her mind sharper than ever, because now she wasn't reacting. She was analyzing, and what she understood changed everything. She hadn't been taken because she was weak. She hadn't been taken because she was vulnerable. She had been taken because she mattered in a way she had never been allowed to realize. The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unspoken, everything waiting to be revealed. And in that silence, one final truth formed with absolute clarity. She wasn't kidnapped randomly. She was taken for a reason. She escaped one control life, only to enter a more dangerous one, Consciousness did not return to Alara Quinn suddenly. It surfaced slowly, carefully, like something testing whether it was safe to exist again. The first thing she noticed was silence, not the distant, controlled quiet of her family's world, not the structured stillness of curated environments. This silence felt intentional, dense, occupied, as if the absence of sound itself was being managed. Her eyes opened gradually, adjusting to the light that filtered softly through wide glass panels. The room around her was unfamiliar, but not hostile. It was spacious, clean, refined in a way that suggested not just wealth, but precision. Everything had purpose. Nothing was excessive. Nothing was careless. Alara remained still, her breathing steady, her awareness expanding carefully outward, because waking up in a place you don't understand is not a moment for reaction. It is a moment for observation. The bed beneath her was comfortable, too comfortable, the kind of comfort designed not to relax, but to control perception, because discomfort makes you resist. Comfort makes you think, and thinking was far more dangerous. Her gaze moved slowly across the room. Minimalist architecture, clean lines, muted tones, no visible cameras, no obvious barriers, no locked doors within sight. But that meant nothing, because the most controlled environments never reveal their structure immediately. Alara sat up slowly, her movements deliberate, her expression composed. Not fear, not panic, just awareness. Because she remembered everything. The wedding, the moment, Lucy and Varric, the collapse of control, her removal, not chaotic, not violent, precise. And now, this. She stood, her bare feet touching the polished floor, cool but not cold. Every detail of the room was calculated to create neutrality, not comfort, not intimidation. Balance, because balance disarms instinct, and instinct is what keeps people resistant. Alara moved toward the window, her steps quiet, controlled. The view beyond revealed nothing obvious. Open land, distant structures, guarded distance. No clear exits, no visible boundaries. But that was the design. Freedom, that cannot be used, is still control. She didn't test the doors. Not yet, because testing too early reveals uncertainty. And uncertainty is something she refused to give. Instead, she turned, because she already knew she wasn't alone. Lucien stood near the far side of the room, not watching her in a way that felt invasive, not avoiding her either. Present, composed, as if her awareness of him was expected and timed. Alara didn't react immediately, because reaction gives power, and power was already unbalanced. "You're awake," he said. His voice was calm, unrushed, not concerned, not relieved, simply acknowledging a fact. Alara studied him carefully, her gaze sharp, her posture steady. "This isn't a prison," she said. A statement, measured, controlled. Lucien didn't move. No, a single word, direct, honest, but incomplete. Ilara's eyes didn't leave him. "But I can't leave." Another statement, not a question, because she already knew the answer. Lucien paused briefly. Then, no. That confirmation settled into the space between them, not aggressively, but definitively. Alara exhaled slowly, her thoughts aligning, because now the structure was clear. This wasn't captivity, not in the traditional sense. There were no chains, no visible locks, no force. But absence of force does not mean absence of control. It means control has evolved. She walked a few steps forward, closing the distance slightly, but not completely, maintaining space, maintaining clarity. "You took me," she said. Lucien didn't deny it. "Yes, and you brought me here." Another confirmation. "Yes." Alara tilted her head slightly, her gaze sharpening. "But you don't treat me like someone you own." This time, Lucien's silence lasted longer, because that statement required consideration. Finally, "I don't own you." The words were simple, but they carried weight, because they defined something important. Ownership implies control through force. And he didn't use force. That made everything more complicated. Then what is this? Elara asked. Her voice remained calm, but beneath it, there was focus, because now, this wasn't about understanding the space. It was about understanding him. Lucien took a slow step closer, his presence filling the distance without pressure. Protection, he said. That word should have created reassurance. It didn't, because protection, in her experience, always came with conditions. And what do you get in return? She asked. Lucien didn't hesitate. Nothing. That answer was the hook, because it didn't make sense. Nothing does not exist in systems like this. Everything has cost. Everything has purpose. Everything has intention. Elara felt the contradiction immediately. People like you don't act without reason, she said. Lucien's gaze held hers. You're not wrong. Another confirmation. Another partial truth. And yet, she continued, you're not telling me what that reason is. A pause. Then, no, that honesty, that refusal to disguise the truth, made him more dangerous. Because predictable deception can be managed, unfiltered truth cannot. Elara crossed her arms lightly, her posture still composed, her thoughts moving faster now. You took me from one controlled life, she said, and placed me in another. Lucien didn't deny it. Yes, but this one, she paused briefly, is quieter, a subtle shift, because quiet control is harder to resist. Lucien watched her carefully now, not analyzing her weakness, but acknowledging her awareness. Noise creates resistance, he said. Silence creates understanding. That was the intellectual hook, because it explained everything. This wasn't about breaking her. It was about positioning her in a space where she would begin to see. And once someone sees, they don't go back. Elara absorbed that slowly, because now the environment made sense. The silence, the control, the absence of force. It wasn't kindness. It was strategy. Her gaze hardened slightly. You didn't take me to control me, she said. Lucien didn't respond immediately, because this was where the truth shifted. Finally, no. And you didn't take me to hurt me. Another pause. No. Elara stepped closer now, her presence no longer cautious, but defined. Then why? This question carried everything, because now it wasn't about the situation. It was about her. Lucien held her gaze, longer this time, more deliberate, because the answer mattered. You're not what they think you are, he said. Elara didn't react outwardly, but internally, that statement landed, because it echoed something she had begun to feel long before this moment. And what do you think I am? She asked. Lucien's expression didn't change. Someone they underestimated. The words were quiet, but they carried weight, because they shifted her role from victim to variable. Elara felt it fully now. The difference, because victims are controlled. Variables change outcomes. Her breathing remained steady, her posture unchanged, but her thoughts sharpened into something new, because now this wasn't about survival. It was about position. You're not keeping me here because I'm weak, she said. Lucien didn't deny it. No, you're keeping me here because I matter. A longer pause. Then, yes. That confirmation changed everything, because now she understood something deeper. This wasn't possession. This wasn't control. This was recognition. And recognition, in a world built on power, is dangerous. Elara turned slightly, her gaze moving across the room again, but this time, not as someone trapped, as someone evaluating. Because now, she wasn't trying to escape. She was trying to understand her value. And value determines everything. Her voice came quieter now, more precise. You didn't take me to break me, she said. Lucien didn't respond, because he didn't need to. You took me because I'm important to something. Another silence. Then, yes. The truth settled fully, because now there was no illusion left, no misunderstanding, no uncertainty. She wasn't here by accident. She wasn't here by force. She was here by design. Ilara's thoughts slowed, aligning into something sharper than fear. Clarity, because clarity removes weakness, and weakness is what systems rely on. Her gaze returned to Lucian, steady, composed, but no longer questioning, because now she understood her position, not a prisoner, not a guest, something else, something in between, valuable, and value changes everything. The silence settled between them once more, but this time it wasn't uncertain. It was defined, because now both of them understood the same truth. She hadn't escaped control. She had entered a more refined version of it, one without visible force, one without resistance, one without illusion. And as that realization settled completely, heavier than fear and sharper than doubt, one final truth formed with absolute certainty. He didn't take her to break her. He took her because she mattered. Her perfect life wasn't real, it was arranged. The silence that followed her realization did not feel empty anymore. It felt structured, defined, as if every unanswered question had simply been waiting for the right moment to surface. Ilara Quinn stood in the center of a world that no longer felt unfamiliar, but unfinished. The room had not changed. The stillness remained. The controlled environment continued to exist exactly as it had before, but her perception had shifted. And once perception changes, reality does not stay the same. She was no longer trying to understand where she was. She was trying to understand where she had been, because for the first time, the life she had left behind felt less real than the one she had been forced into. And that was the most dangerous realization of all. Ilara moved slowly across the room, her steps quiet, deliberate, her thoughts aligning into patterns she had never allowed herself to see before. Her family, their expectations, their silence, their control, none of it had ever been random. None of it had ever been emotional. It had always been strategic. She stopped near the window again, her gaze unfocused, not looking outward but inward, tracing every moment that had once felt normal. Now, nothing did. The engagement wasn't about me, she said quietly. Not to Lucian, not even fully to herself. Just a statement that had finally formed. Lucian, standing at a distance, didn't interrupt, because he understood something she was only beginning to accept. Truth must be realized, not given. It was never about you, he said. The confirmation came without hesitation, without softness, because truth doesn't adjust itself to comfort. Ilara's expression didn't change, but internally, something tightened. Not pain, not yet, recognition, because that statement aligned too perfectly with what she had started to see. Adrian Cross, the man she was supposed to marry, the man the world saw as powerful, successful, untouchable, the man who had stood at the altar, waiting. Ilara's thoughts moved carefully now, not rushing, not resisting, because rushing leads to denial, and denial destroys clarity. He needed something, she said. Lucian didn't respond immediately, but his silence was not disagreement. What did he need? She asked. This time, her voice carried more weight, because now she was no longer asking about the past. She was questioning the structure. Lucian stepped slightly closer, his presence steady, his tone unchanged. Access, he said. That word, simple as it was, carried layers, because access, in a world like this, means control over something hidden. Ilara's gaze sharpened. My family. Not a question, a conclusion. Lucian nodded once. Yes. The confirmation settled heavily, because now the structure became clearer. This wasn't a relationship. It was an exchange, not emotional, not personal, transactional. Ilara exhaled slowly, her thoughts accelerating, connecting details she had ignored for years. Meetings she was never part of, conversations that ended when she entered a room, decisions made around her, but never with her. They were using me, she said. The words came quietly, but they carried weight. Lucian didn't deny it. Yes, and that was the emotional hook, because betrayal is not always loud. Sometimes it is built slowly, quietly, by the very people you trust the most. Alara felt it then, not as anger, not yet as absence, because the life she thought she had was never hers, and realizing that does not break you instantly. It empties you first. Her hands remained steady, her posture controlled, but her thoughts moved deeper now, because now she wasn't just questioning her engagement. She was questioning her entire identity. What was I giving them? She asked. Lucian's gaze didn't shift. Leverage. Another word, another layer, because leverage means power over something or someone. Alara felt the final piece begin to form, because now this wasn't just about her family or Adrian. This was bigger, a network, a structure, a system built on influence and exchange. And she had been part of it, not as a player, as a piece. Her jaw tightened slightly, not out of emotion, out of clarity. They didn't care about what I wanted. Lucian didn't respond, because the answer was obvious. Alara turned slowly, facing him fully now, her gaze no longer uncertain. They needed the alliance, she continued, and I was a connection. Lucian nodded once. Yes, that confirmation settled fully, because now there was no illusion left, no misunderstanding, no doubt. Her life had been arranged. Every step, every decision, every expectation, designed, controlled, executed. Without her, her breathing remained steady, but her awareness sharpened further, because now she wasn't just seeing the past. She was seeing the pattern, and patterns. Repeat. Adrian knew, she said. This time, her voice carried something new, not fear, not confusion, something closer to calculation. Lucian's expression didn't change. Yes, that answer mattered, because it confirmed something critical. Adrian Cross was not just part of the system. He understood it. He operated within it, which meant everything he had shown her, everything he had presented, was intentional, constructed, false. Alara felt something shift deeper inside her, because now this wasn't just betrayal. It was manipulation. At the highest level, he wasn't distant, she said slowly. He was controlled. Lucian didn't interrupt, because that realization was hers to claim. He didn't care about me, she continued. He cared about what I represented. Another silence, another truth. Alara's thoughts moved faster now, aligning into something sharper than anything she had felt before, because now she understood her role, not as a partner, not as a future wife, as an asset, something valuable, something transferable, something necessary, but not personal. Her voice dropped slightly. They were trading power, she said. Lucian held her gaze. Yes, that confirmation, that simple, direct truth, changed everything, because now there was no denial left, no illusion, no escape from what this meant. Her life had never been hers. It had been part of a larger exchange, and she had been the center of it. Alara exhaled slowly, her posture steady, but her thoughts no longer conflicted, because now she wasn't trying to hold on to anything. She was letting it collapse. Every memory, every assumption, every belief, reevaluated, reconstructed, destroyed, and from that, something new began to form. Understanding. Because once you understand something, you can no longer be controlled by it in the same way. Her gaze sharpened further. Why didn't you tell me all of this before? She asked. Lucian didn't hesitate. Because you wouldn't have believed it. That answer was true, and that made it impossible to argue with. Alara nodded slightly, more to herself than to him, because now she saw it, the way everything had been hidden in plain sight, the way truth had always been there, but never visible, because she had never been meant to see it. Her voice came quieter now, more precise. They weren't protecting me. A pause. They were positioning me. Lucian didn't respond, because that realization was complete. Alara felt the emotional shift finally begin, not explosive, not overwhelming, controlled, because she didn't break. She adapted, and adaptation is more dangerous than reaction. Her gaze moved away briefly, her mind no longer searching for answers, but building new ones. Because now, the question wasn't what happened, it was why, and more importantly, what comes next. She turned back to Lucien, her expression calm, but no longer passive. "Then why did you stop it?" she asked. This time, the question carried everything, because now she needed to understand him, not just the past. Lucien's gaze remained steady, because their plan wasn't the only one. That answer shifted everything again, because it meant this wasn't just disruption, it was interference. Calculated, strategic, intentional. Ilera felt the weight of that settle, because now she wasn't just part of one system. She was caught between two. Her voice lowered slightly. "And I'm still part of it." Not a question, a realization. Lucien didn't deny it. Yes, that truth, that undeniable reality, placed her exactly where she now stood. Not free, not controlled, in between. And that was the most dangerous place to be, because in between, you can choose. Ilera's final thought settled with sharp clarity, cutting through everything she had believed before, because now she understood one thing above all else. Adrian Cross had never been her future. He had been part of her cage, and cages don't exist without purpose. Her gaze hardened slightly, her mind already moving toward the next layer of truth, because now there was one question left, one that mattered more than anything else. If Adrian wasn't her savior, then what was he hiding? This was never about love, it was about power. The truth did not settle gently. It reshaped everything. Ilera Quinn stood in a reality that no longer allowed illusion, no longer offered comfort, and no longer hid behind appearances. What she had once believed to be a carefully arranged life now revealed itself as something far more complex and far more dangerous. Her engagement, her family, Adrian Cross. None of it had been about emotion, stability, or future. It had been about alignment, position, power. And now, that power was in motion. Ilera remained still, her posture composed, her thoughts sharper than they had ever been. The room around her felt unchanged, but the meaning of everything within it had shifted, because now she could see the structure. And once you see the structure, you see the conflict. Lucien Verek was no longer just a man who took her. He was part of something larger, something that opposed everything she had been raised inside. And that opposition was not subtle. It was war, not visible, not loud, but real. "You didn't stop the wedding just to save me," she said quietly. Her voice carried no accusation, only clarity. Lucien stood across from her, his presence unchanged, his control absolute. No, the answer came without hesitation, because truth no longer needed to be softened. Ilera nodded slightly, because she already knew. "This is about him," she continued. "Adrian." Lucien's gaze held hers. Yes, that confirmation settled deeper than anything before it, because now the two worlds she had never questioned were colliding, not accidentally, intentionally. Ilera's thoughts aligned rapidly, connecting the pieces she now understood. Adrian Cross, structured power, legal influence, corporate reach, a system that controlled from the surface. Lucien Verek, unstructured power, hidden influence, a system that controlled from the shadows. Two different worlds, two different methods, but the same objective, control, and she was the connection between them. That realization struck with precision, not emotional, not overwhelming, clear, because clarity is what makes truth dangerous. "I was a bridge," she said, "not a question, a conclusion." Lucien didn't deny it. Yes, the word settled heavily, because now her role was undeniable. She wasn't just part of one system. She linked two, and that made her valuable. But more importantly, it made her dangerous. Ilera exhaled slowly, her posture steady, her thoughts accelerating into something sharper. They weren't just forming an alliance, she said. They were securing control. Lucian's silence confirmed it, because control, in a world like this, is never shared. It is taken, maintained, defended. Her gaze hardened slightly. And you disrupted that. Yes. Simple, direct, unapologetic, because disruption was his intention. Ilera turned slightly, her focus shifting inward, analyzing the scale of what she now stood inside. This wasn't a personal conflict. This wasn't about betrayal alone. This was a power struggle between systems, between influence, between control structures that operated at levels she had never been allowed to see. And now, she was visible inside it. "They're looking for me," she said. Lucian didn't hesitate. Yes, that answer confirmed the next layer, because now this wasn't contained. It was active. Movement had begun. Searches, signals, pressure, everything shifting because she was no longer where she was supposed to be. Her presence had disrupted the balance. Ilera's thoughts sharpened further. "They don't want me back," she said. A pause. "They need me back." Lucian's gaze didn't shift. Yes, that distinction mattered, because want is optional, need is not. And if they needed her, then she was not just part of the system. She was essential to it. Her breathing remained steady, but her awareness expanded beyond the room, beyond the walls, beyond the illusion of isolation, because now she understood something critical. This place was not hiding her. It was shielding her. "They'll try to find this place," she said. Lucian nodded once. "They already are." That answer changed everything, because it meant this wasn't future risk. It was present, immediate, ongoing. Ilera felt the shift fully now, because she was no longer outside the conflict. She was inside it, and inside means exposed. Her gaze moved back to him, steady, controlled, but no longer uncertain. "This isn't about keeping me here," she said. Lucian didn't respond, because he didn't need to. "This is about keeping them away from me." A pause. Then, yes. That confirmation settled deeper than anything else, because now the structure was complete. This wasn't captivity. It was containment, protection, from something far more dangerous than anything she had experienced before. Ilera turned slightly, her thoughts no longer scattered, because now they had direction. "They can't afford for me to disappear again," she said. Lucian's gaze remained steady. "No, and they can't afford for me to speak." Another pause. "No." The implications were clear, because silence, in systems like this, is enforced, and enforced silence only exists one way: permanent. Ilera felt the weight of that settle without panic, because panic no longer served a purpose. Understanding did, and understanding had given her clarity. "They won't negotiate," she said. Lucian didn't deny it. "No, they'll eliminate the problem." Yes. The words were simple, but they carried absolute certainty, because now there was no illusion left, no misunderstanding, no hope that this could be resolved quietly. This was conflict, and conflict, at this level, does not end without consequence. Ilera stepped back slightly, not retreating, but adjusting her position within the reality she now understood, because now she wasn't reacting, she was preparing. "They built a system to control power," she said. Lucian watched her carefully. "Yes, and I'm the flaw in it." That statement shifted everything, because flaws change outcomes. Lucian didn't correct her, because she was right. Ilera felt the shift internally. Not fear, not weakness, something else. Awareness of her position, because now she understood her value, not as a person, but as leverage, and leverage decides outcomes. Her voice came quieter now, more focused. "They're not just after me," she said. "They're protecting something bigger." Lucian nodded once. Yes, that confirmation revealed the final layer, because now this wasn't just about control. It was about something hidden, something operating beneath everything she had known, something that could not be exposed, and she was connected to it. Ilera exhaled slowly, her posture straightening, her thoughts aligning into something sharper than anything she had felt before. Because now, she understood the truth. This was never about love, never about family, never about marriage. It had always been about power, and power does not tolerate unpredictability. She looked back at Lucien, her expression calm, but no longer passive. "You didn't take me to control me," she said. Lucien didn't respond, because he didn't need to. "You took me because I'm a threat to them." A pause. Then, "Yes." The answer landed with finality, because it confirmed everything. Her position, her value, her danger. Elara absorbed that slowly, because now there was no confusion left. She was not a victim. She was a target, and targets are not protected without reason. Her gaze hardened slightly, her thoughts moving toward what came next, because understanding the system is only the beginning. Surviving it is something else entirely. The silent stretch between them, filled with everything that had been revealed, everything that had changed, everything that was coming next, because now there was no turning back, only forward, inside a war she had never chosen, but was now part of. And as that realization settled fully, sharper than fear and heavier than truth, one final certainty formed with absolute clarity. She wasn't taken to be controlled. She was taken to be protected. The most dangerous man in her life was the only one keeping her alive. Understanding changed everything, but it did not make anything easier. Elara Quinn stood in a reality where every illusion had been stripped away. The system she once trusted had revealed itself as manipulation. The life she believed she controlled had exposed itself as design. And the man she feared had become the only constant in a world built on uncertainty. Lucien Varick. He had taken her, disrupted everything, rewritten the direction of her life in a single moment, and yet he had not harmed her, had not controlled her through force, had not treated her like something disposable. That contradiction was what made him dangerous in a way she could not define. Elara remained still, her posture composed, her thoughts moving with deliberate precision, because now this was not about fear. It was about evaluation, and evaluation required clarity. "You knew they would come for me," she said quietly. Lucien didn't look away. Yes, no hesitation, no uncertainty, just truth. Elara absorbed that, because now she was no longer questioning whether he understood the situation. He did, completely. "And you still took me," she continued. "Yes." Again, simple, direct, certain. Elara's gaze sharpened slightly. "Which means you were prepared." A pause. Then, "Yes." That answer mattered, because preparation implies strategy, and strategy means intention. Elara exhaled slowly, her thoughts aligning into something sharper, because now she wasn't asking what he had done. She was asking why, and more importantly, what it meant for her. "You didn't take me without a plan," she said. Lucien didn't deny it. No, another confirmation, another piece of truth. Elara stepped slightly closer, not cautious, not defensive, focused, because now she was no longer reacting to him. She was analyzing him. "You've been protecting me since the moment I left that place," she said. Lucien's expression didn't change. "Yes, that was the hook, because protection, when consistent, becomes a pattern, and patterns reveal intention." Elara felt it settle, not emotionally, structurally. Every step he had taken, every decision, every controlled environment, none of it had been about possession. It had been about containment from something outside, something real, something far more dangerous than him. Her voice lowered slightly. "You're not the threat," she said. Lucien didn't respond, because he didn't need to. That truth had already been established. "They are," she continued. A pause. Then, "Yes." The confirmation carried weight, because now the structure was clear. Fear had been misplaced, directed at the wrong source. And that changed everything. Elara turned slightly, her thoughts no longer conflicted, but evolving, because fear, when understood, Transforms, not into trust, not immediately, but into something else. Recognition. And recognition is the beginning of alignment. You could have left me there, she said. Lucian didn't interrupt. You could have let them keep control. Another silence, because again, the answer was obvious. But you didn't, she finished. Lucian's gaze held hers. No, that answer, simple as it was, carried weight, because it confirmed one undeniable truth. He had chosen to act. And choice, in situations like this, always comes with risk. Ilara felt that realization deepen, because now she wasn't just evaluating his actions, she was evaluating his position, and positions define outcomes. You're not avoiding them, she said. Lucian didn't move. No, you're standing against them. A longer pause. Then, yes. That confirmation shifted the dynamic completely, because now this wasn't just protection. It was opposition. Active, intentional, ongoing, and she was part of it. Ilara exhaled slowly, her posture steady, her thoughts sharper than ever, because now she understood something critical. This wasn't about escaping danger. It was about choosing where to stand inside it. Her gaze returned to him, no longer uncertain, no longer defensive. You didn't take me out of their system, she said. Lucian watched her carefully. No, you moved me into yours. Another pause. Then, yes. That truth settled, because now there was no illusion left. She had not been freed. She had been repositioned from one structure to another, but the difference was intention. Her voice came quieter now, more precise. Their system used me, she said. Lucian didn't respond. Yours protects me. A longer silence. Then, yes. That answer mattered more than anything else, because it defined the difference between control and purpose. Ilara absorbed it slowly, because now she was no longer questioning his actions. She was understanding them, and understanding creates direction. Her thoughts shifted again, moving toward the reality she now faced. I can't survive this alone, she said. Not a question, not an admission of weakness, a statement of fact. Lucian didn't hesitate. No, that confirmation, that simple, undeniable truth, closed the final gap, because now there was no alternative left, no illusion of independence, no false sense of escape. This was bigger than her, bigger than him, bigger than anything she had ever known, and survival required structure. Her gaze hardened slightly, her mind no longer divided, because now the conflict was clear. Escape or alignment, run or stand. Both carried risk. Both carried consequence. But only one offered a chance. Ilara turned slightly, her thoughts no longer searching, but deciding, because now she understood something deeper. Trust is not emotional, not in a world like this. It is strategic. You don't trust someone because you feel safe. You trust them because the alternative is worse. Her voice came steady. You're the only reason I'm still alive. Lucian didn't respond, because he didn't need to. The truth was already there. And that means, she paused briefly, I need you. The words settled in the space between them. Not emotional, not dependent, functional. Lucian's expression didn't change, but his silence acknowledged it. Ilara felt the shift fully now, because this was the moment, not the wedding, not the truth about her past. This, the decision, because everything before this had been forced. This was chosen. Her gaze held his, steady, clear, without hesitation. I don't trust you, she said. The words were direct, unfiltered, honest. Lucian didn't react, because honesty was expected. But I understand you, she continued. A pause. And right now that's enough. That was a turning point, because understanding is the foundation of alignment, and alignment creates power. Ilara exhaled slowly. Her thoughts no longer conflicted, because now she had clarity. He was dangerous, unpredictable, uncontrolled. But he was also consistent, and consistency, in a world built on deception, is rare. Her voice lowered slightly. If I walk away, I don't survive. Lucian didn't interrupt. If I stay, I become part of this. Another silence, because again, the truth was obvious. Illyra's final thought aligned with absolute precision, because now there was no illusion left, no confusion, no uncertainty, only choice, and choice defines everything that comes next. She stepped forward slightly, closing the distance just enough to change the space between them. Not surrender, not submission. Positioning, because now she wasn't reacting to him. She was standing with him, even if she didn't fully trust it yet. The silence settled around them, not uncertain, not tense, but defined, because now both of them understood the same thing. This was no longer about fear, or control, or even survival alone. It was about alignment, inside a system that would destroy anything unpredictable. And she was now unpredictable. Her final realization settled, sharp and unyielding, cutting through everything that remained uncertain, because now she knew exactly where she stood, between risk and necessity, between fear and survival, between him and everything else. And as that truth settled completely, heavier than doubt and sharpened fear, one final thought echoed with absolute clarity. Trusting him could save her or destroy her completely. For the first time, she didn't belong to anyone. She chose her own path. The decision did not arrive as a sudden realization. It formed slowly, layer by layer, truth by truth, until there was nothing left to question. Illyra Quinn stood in a space that no longer felt like confinement, yet did not pretend to be freedom. The walls had not changed. The structure remained controlled, calculated, precise. But something else had shifted, her position inside it, because for the first time since everything began, she was no longer reacting. She was deciding. The silence around her was no longer heavy with uncertainty. It carried clarity, a kind of stillness that only exists when the mind has stopped searching for answers and started choosing direction. Lucian Varick remained where he was, his presence unchanged, his posture steady, his control intact. But there was something different now. He wasn't guiding the moment. He wasn't shaping it. He was allowing it. And that was power of a different kind. Because control is easy when it is forced. But allowing someone to choose, that requires certainty. Illyra understood that instantly, which meant this moment was real, not constructed, not manipulated, not designed. Hers, completely. Her gaze moved briefly toward the space beyond, not searching for escape, but acknowledging it. The outside world still existed. Open, unpredictable, dangerous. A place she could walk into. A place no one was stopping her from reaching. And that was what made this moment different from everything before it. Because freedom had always been something given to her, or taken from her. Never something she defined. Until now, her thoughts moved carefully, not rushed, not uncertain. Every part of her past aligned with what stood in front of her. Her family, their expectations, the engagement, the carefully constructed life that had never belonged to her, and the system behind it, the deals, the alliances, the silent exchanges of power where she had been nothing more than a piece. Moved, positioned, controlled. She had never chosen any of it. Not the life, not the role, not the future. And that was the truth that mattered most. Because now she could. Her voice came quiet but steady. I can walk away. The words were simple, but they carried weight. Lucian didn't hesitate. Yes. No resistance. No condition. No hidden meaning. Just truth. Illyra held that for a moment, letting it settle fully. Because that confirmation was everything. He wasn't keeping her here. He wasn't forcing her to stay. He wasn't controlling the outcome, which meant whatever happened next would belong to her, fully, completely, irrevocably. She exhaled slowly, her thoughts no longer divided, because now this wasn't about fear or survival alone. It was about identity, her identity, something she had lost long before this moment, something taken from her by systems that never saw her as a person, only as value, only as leverage, only as something to be used. Her gaze sharpened slightly, her posture straightening, not defensively, but intentionally, because now she wasn't just standing in a controlled space. She was standing at the edge of choice, and choice creates power. Her mind moved through the possibilities. If she left, she would reclaim independence, freedom from Lucian, freedom from this world, freedom from everything that had pulled her into the situation. But she would also step into uncertainty, into a system she now understood was watching, waiting, ready, and alone. She would not survive it. That truth did not frighten her. It grounded her, because clarity removes illusion. Her gaze returned to Lucian, steady, focused, no hesitation left, because now this wasn't about whether she trusted him. It was about whether she understood the reality she stood in. And she did, completely. You didn't give me freedom, she said. A pause, because the next part defined everything. You gave me a choice. Lucian didn't respond, because the statement was correct. Ilera felt the shift settle fully, because now the power dynamic had changed, not through force, not through control, but through awareness. She was no longer the one being moved. She was the one deciding where to stand. Her voice lowered slightly, more precise, more grounded. My family controlled me. A brief pause. The system used me. Another pause. But this? She glanced around, not at the walls, but at the structure. This is the first time no one is deciding for me. The silence that followed was different. Not empty, not uncertain. Resolved, because now everything had aligned. Her past, her present, her understanding, all leading to one point: decision. Ilera stepped forward slowly, not toward him, but toward herself, toward the version of her that had been buried under expectation, control, and manipulation, because now she was not that person anymore. She was something else, something aware, something intentional, something dangerous in a way she had never been before. Her thoughts sharpened, because now this wasn't about escaping systems. It was about confronting them. Her voice came steady. I'm not leaving. The words settled with weight, because they were not forced, not influenced, not shaped by fear. Chosen. Lucian didn't react immediately, but his silence acknowledged it. Ilera continued, her tone unchanged. But I'm not staying as a captive. A pause, because that distinction mattered. I'm staying as someone who understands what this is. Another pause, and what it requires. The meaning was clear. She wasn't surrendering. She was aligning, on her terms. Her gaze held his, unwavering now. Everything they built. She paused briefly. I can see it. Lucian didn't interrupt, because he knew what that meant. And if I can see it, her voice lowered slightly. I can break it. That was the transformation. Not emotional, not reactive, strategic, because now she wasn't part of the system. She was a threat to it. Ilera exhaled slowly. Her posture fully settled into something stronger than anything she'd been before. Control, not imposed, not taken, claimed. Her gaze moved again, not outward, but forward, because now the direction was clear. She wasn't running. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't surviving. She was choosing to act, to take back what had been taken, to redefine what had been controlled, to become something the system had not planned for. Independent, unpredictable, dangerous. Her voice came quieter, but sharper. They took my identity. A pause. They turned me into something useful. Another pause. But I decide what I become now. The words carried weight, because they were not just statements. They were intention. Lucian watched her, not evaluating, not controlling, acknowledging, because now the dynamic had shifted completely. She was no longer someone he had taken. She was someone who had chosen to stay. And that changed everything. Ilera took another step forward, closing the space between them just enough to define alignment. not dependence, not submission. Position, because now they stood on the same side, not equal in power, but aligned in purpose. And purpose creates balance. Her final thought settled, clear and unshakable, because now she understood what freedom truly meant. It wasn't about leaving. It wasn't about escape. It wasn't about distance. It was about choice, the ability to decide, and to stand by that decision, no matter what followed. Her voice came one last time, steady, controlled, final. I choose this. Lucien didn't respond, because there was nothing left to say. The decision was complete. The silence that followed was not empty. It was resolved, because everything had shifted. The past no longer defined her. The system no longer controlled her. And the future was no longer something planned by others. It was something she would create, through action, through strategy, through will. And as that realization settled fully, stronger than fear and sharper than truth, one final certainty formed. She was never meant to belong to anyone, not her family, not Adrian, not even Lucien. She belonged to herself. And that was the most dangerous thing she could become, because a person who chooses their own path cannot be controlled. And as the moment closed with absolute clarity, one final thought remained, echoing with quiet intensity. She was meant to marry a billionaire. But choosing the Mafia boss changed everything.